Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net. This is more of an audio test than anything else, but I thought, hey, I got some new equipment. I figured why not do a video right here and publish it for you guys. I became a fan of Tom Clancy books probably around the time Rainbow Six came out for PC. The original Rainbow Six games came out for PC. And ironically enough, I'll even show you guys. You can see some of these books that I have up here are actually Tom Clancy's. I read them a lot when I was in high school. I enjoyed them. Of course, I was reading the original books, such as, I tried my best. I think I read Rainbow Six first, and then as time went on, I wanted to read them in order. And I had heard about Without Remorse, which which I was told was a prequel to Rainbow Six, which it was. And then after I enjoyed Without Remorse as well, and I thought to myself, okay, well, that's great. That means that I can get back to watching, reading some of the more of the books and basically going into the Jack Ryan books. And I read Clear and Present Danger, Hunt for Red October, and basically make my way all the way through the Deus. And obviously didn't reread Rainbow Six. And then by that point, I believe The Teeth of the Dragon came out, which I thought was actually another pretty good book. And that basically got me through the entire series. But at the same time that Tom Clancy was writing, the Jack Ryan series, somebody was writing, and it wasn't Tom Clancy, although it had Tom Clancy's name on it, and you could find it in Tom Clancy's book section. There were other books that were coming out at the same time that were basically being written under Tom Clancy properties. And of course, the most famous of which is probably considered to be Splinter Cell. Even though Splinter Cell originally was not a book, it was a video game. It was always a video game. There were Splinter Cell novelizations that are prequel books and stuff like that, basically, that were later written, not by Tom Clancy himself, but by other credited writers. But that's not the series that I kind of wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about another Tom Clancy series that I was familiar with, which I first became aware of when they did a two-night made-for-TV movie. And that was Tom Clancy's Netforce. Tom Clancy's Netforce was a book series that took place in the future. The year in the books was 2010. Although in the made-for-TV movie, it was 2005. I believe the books came out around 1999 or so. The original books did. And it followed the case, the story of a team of cyber police known as the Netforce. And they were a branch of the U.S. government, and their job was essentially to basically trace out major cyber criminals. And over time, and basically the catalyst, or at least the first book story, revolved around the assassination of their then leader, Steve Day, and basically his second in command was being brought up to basically replace it. The book was kind of adapted in this made-for-TV movie. Like I said, it was like either a two-night event or it was like a 3.5 hour movie. I watched it when it was rebroadcast on, I think, in syndication on the Sci-Fi channel, and it starred Scott Bakula as what's that guy's name? The guy who played Whistler and Blade, whose name escapes me off the top of my head. But basically that was and of course the whole story is, of course, they foresaw by like 2005 all cyberspace access would be, or internet access would be done through virtual reality. And so a lot of the majority of the books and of the even the made-for-TV movie took place in virtual reality, cyberpunk-ish venues and stuff. And the books could get away with some basically trending and adult content and stuff like that. I was in high school, so I was like all for whenever. And Tom Clancy would sometimes, talk about that kind of stuff. There would be violence. There would be other R-rated concepts in there. Nothing enormously graphic as far as I know, but or as far as I remember. But there were some things that certainly treaded lines. But I actually thought the series was kind of groundbreaking for a lot of reasons. Specifically, they did foresee a virtual reality at around the time when everybody was talking about virtual reality, or around the time virtual reality was kind of on its way out. But people were already starting to get nostalgic for it, or about what the future could hold for it. Basically, it envisioned that instead of going to web pages, either through your tablet or your phone, or even through a computer, you would basically log on to a computer and put on virtual reality goggles, and then you would go to web spaces and stuff like that. All communication, for the most part, instant messages would even go through virtual reality. So all spaces, and people could design their own virtual reality spaces. So this was good for the Netforce people, because obviously they had some skilled techs, including my favorite character in the entire series, a character named Jay Gridley. And he had out of the whole story, I think him and I believe the son of the guy who was in charge of their military attaché were probably the two characters throughout the entire series of books that had the most character development going on for them. And that was, I thought, kind of cool, actually. But when I started reading the books, by the time that the books first came out, I started reading it around the time, like I said, the miniseries happened on television. I think by that point, the first 2 volumes were out in print, but there weren't any more. And the funny thing is that the series brought in some concepts that weren't brought in until later books. Like the plot line of the first book played out much differently than the plot line of the made-for-TV movie. The only beats that really matched word for word, beat for beat, opening for opening, was the opening scene, basically, where Steve Day is assassinated. Everything else, and the character assassin of the Silky, or what's referred to in the, it's never named in the series, but in the book it's referred to, the assassin is referred to as the Silky. And I think they're credited in the cast of crew credits as the Silky, but that was basically it. Nothing else really carried over. It was established that the guy in charge of Netforce and the second in command were in a relationship. That hadn't happened yet in the books. It was inferred that the second in command was extremely attracted to the first in command. Scott Bakula, so, okay. But basically there was nothing in the first book. They didn't really start getting together until around 3rd book. Certainly by the 4th book they were together. But those, of course, hadn't been published yet. And at the end, it was established that Steve Day, at least in the miniseries, okay, I'm going to give you a spoiler for a 20-plus-year-old miniseries, but in the end of the miniseries, Steve Day was discovered to have faked his own death because he was a traitor who wanted to destroy the internet. And that is not what happened. Steve Day, I don't think I read the final book, and I certainly never read the last half of the last book that I read, but Steve Day did not come back from the dead. Steve Day died, and he stayed dead in the books. So, why am I talking about this? The year is 2024. They kind of had to stop publishing the books as time went on. Obviously, years passed, and obviously the book started in 2010. The movie started in 2005, but it was just a one-off. They did get one joke prediction. They were like 99% there. Basically, they said Star Wars 7 would come out in 2005. There was a Star Wars movie that came out. It was Star Wars 3. So, yeah, they were off on that one, but so close, so close. They probably could have predicted that one, so that's why I don't know why they got it wrong. Maybe they got it wrong intentionally, I don't know. But even in 99, we knew Star Wars Episode 3 was going to come out in 2005. So that was kind of weird. But needless to say, as time went on, real time started catching up to the books. And the events of September 2001 happened also. And that got referenced in the later books, of course. But even though the events would have technically happened, because obviously the books takes place in 2010, those events happened in 2001. Why were they only referencing them by book 2, book 3, that sort of thing, basically? So I get that. And of course, as books went on, they became more and more about that, but that's neither here nor there. I guess that you could say that real time was kind of catching up to the series, and probably by at least the third to last book, the book was called Changing of the Guard. They pretty much recast everybody except for Jay. They replaced pretty much everybody in the book. Like, everybody was gone, and with an entirely new cast. And I honestly couldn't tell you why. Like, 2 or 3 characters stuck around. Like I said, Jay stayed around. But everybody else left and was replaced with new characters. I don't know. I did like the fact that they kind of had a villain of the book. So every book would have its own villain. And at some points they followed up with guys who got away or something like that. But they would always be ancillary characters. So I did like the structure of the book. If they wanted to redo it again, obviously they would have like a movie of the week kind of thing. Where basically you've got a bunch of... where you could basically have a different villain, every week with their own motivations. And there were some very interesting concepts that they talked about, or villain modification. There was a couple of book concepts that were quite not just futuristic, but also very forward-thinking. One of the books detailed, well, what would happen if a hacker got his hands on a quantum computer, which even in the purpose of the book, they basically said, oh, we can't have a quantum computer. Those can't exist. They're just theoretical. Well, this guy had built one. This guy, and it worked. What kind of damage could he do with it? That sort of thing, basically. Basically, any encryption could be brute forced in a matter of seconds. Which everybody looked at, well, this is our best encryption. It was brute forced. How is that possible? Then they find out, oh crap, this guy's got a quantum computer. And that's how I first learned about quantum computers, actually. I was not familiar with the theory. This was 2000. This was the year 2000 that we're talking about this stuff. Another one was a concept that involved an entire nation of people, and I say nation with like quotation marks, that wanted to exist entirely online. And there were consequences of what their wants were if they in fact had no national identity. And this is the concept where that kind of thing falls apart. I know a lot of people have been talking about that kind of stuff for the last 30 years. Well, I can tell you this right now. We're not beings of energy. When we become beings of energy, you can have a digital persona, basically, but we're not there yet. But and that was like something that I don't think anybody brought up, but they did basically say, I guess their logic behind it, or why they were wrong, was like, oh, it's just a human invention, just like anything else. Like all human inventions, there were eventually mistakes with it, which is an argument, but you can basically win any argument with that kind of argument. So, but it was just, nobody come up with, well, these aren't beings of energy. These are people. They have to live somewhere. And somebody did say that at one point. He's like, well, these people do have to physically live somewhere. So there was, you have to have an address. You have to, that sort of thing. So that was actually a pretty good argument. That wasn't even made by the smart guy. That was made by the military guy talking to his son. So I thought that made for a great scene, for a pretty decent book. But yeah, nobody brought up the pure energy yet. There are some other people that might be a little bit younger than me, but that might also remember Netforce, but they might think to themselves, I don't remember the plot of like this matching this. But you're only like I would say maybe a few years younger than I am. But you might have remembered books, but you don't remember anything along those lines. And that's because, as far as I know, there was actually a junior novelization series of Netforce as well, also written under the Tom Clancy brand, also not written by Tom Clancy. I don't know if this series existed in the same quote-unquote universe as the adult Netflix books. But there was a junior novelization series of Netforce that was referred to as, I don't know if they were like Netforce Warriors or something, but it basically was about a bunch of kids who helped Netforce out in virtual reality. Basically, they're not really referenced in the main novels, so I don't know exactly how canonical it is. I could imagine that the Attaché Sun would be a part of it, but I never read the book, so I can't comment. And I think again, Jay Gridley might have been involved in the books, but again, I never read the books, and information about them is kind of sparse online. So, anyways, that was just my thoughts, my memories of Netforce. What was the point of me doing this video? Not too many people remember it. Some people might actually remember the made-for-TV movie, but again, you could probably find it through various means. There was a DVD release for it, of course. But nobody really talks about it to this day. And I remembered watching it. That was my first exposure to Quantum Leap Scott Bakula. Actually, I never watched Quantum Leap at back at that time. I would later watch it or start watching Quantum Leap reruns when I was in college, and it's since obviously probably the best syndicated show ever made in history. Is Quantum Leap. But I remembered when they cast Scott Bakula as Captain Archer in Star Trek Enterprise. I remember thinking, "Wow, the guy from Netforce. That's awesome. He'll make a great captain." And I remember being really looking forward to that because I liked him from Netforce. Anyways, I was just curious if anybody else remembers that series, if they remember it differently, what their thoughts about it were. Because as I look around, we're kind of on the cusp of Netforce's reality becoming a reality. I've got VR headset literally right in front of me that I'm ready to put on and go into a web space, basically. I don't know. Until next time, guys, my name is Maniac with GamingSess.net. Take care. Over and out.